our leadership over there has been so welcoming to my not at all secret gay agenda, and so let's have these two characters kiss. Let's in the background. I was just wherever I could, just basically adding queerness to if you see anything queer in the show, I'm proud of them. But I just was no one would stop me, and no one was trying to.
I'm here as a mother of two queer children, actually. One transgender child and one pansexual child, from so many of my colleagues over the course of the last couple weeks, in open forums and through emails and phone conversations. And again, the home of really incredible, groundbreaking LGBTQIA stories over the years, where one of our execs stood up and said, we only have a handful of queer leads in our content. And I went, what? That can't be true. And I realized, oh, it actually is true. We have many, many, many LGBTQIA characters in our stories, and yet we don't have enough leads.
Now loading.
I think it's become abundantly clear among fans and critics that Disney, DreamWorks, and other animation studios have become creatively bankrupt with remakes, sequels, and political agenda they like to push. Although sequels and remakes aren't always a bad idea, you do need to show a very good reason why you're reviving characters people loved. Even though modern Western animations haven't been doing well, some have shown unique and well-executed creativity with projects they have released. Even though I'm not a fan of Japanese anime or consistently watch their films, I slowly started to develop appreciation for the art they produce. And to be honest, I'm actually impressed. They have consistently become successful with their projects and still gain cultural relevance among younger demographics. Whenever I pay attention to entertainment media, Japanese anime seem to get less criticism compared to most Western animation companies, aka American animation. And there are multiple factors why. 1. Japanese anime doesn't only cater to younger children, but caters to teens and probably adults. 2. The characters tend to be a lot more complex or relatable. And 3. They don't have obsession with identity politics, which Japanese storytellers tend to be more in touch with reality compared to American storytellers who keep exposing their hypocrisy. And this is a very important note, Hollywood. From someone who pays more attention to Western animation than anime, it's become absolute tragedy that animation studios like DreamWorks, Sony Pictures Animation, Pixar, or Disney have gone from all-time classic, masterpiece, rich, artistic, to soulless and heartless storytelling, which either has no meaning or less impactful meaning of their story. The main problem with most animated films today is they keep repeating the same trope over and over again, especially the quirky, adorable personality, which no longer focuses on serious or mature themes in cartoons nowadays. Historically, some animated films became classic or masterpiece through simplistic storytelling, but today they focus less on storytelling, the journey characters go through, but modern messaging they push, trying to fit into modern society to tell their audience how the past is outdated, which in my previous videos I've talked about how Hollywood no longer values old classical female characters because of. There was even a point where animation used to have a level of mystique, which is lost today. Most of the villains in old Disney cartoons represented mystique, since audiences aren't aware how the characters became villain. Movies like Coraline had mystique, which many of these dark fantasy films were atmospheric. Howl's Moving Castle also represented mystique when we see the main wizard character using his magical powers for wickedness in order to maintain his privacy while trying to hide his true vulnerable self. Many animated films back in the day had darker themes. When you watch films like Prince of Egypt, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Nightmare Before Christmas, Corpse Bride, Coraline, Kubo and the Two Strings, ParaNorman, Monster House, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, The Hunchback of the Notre Dame, and The Secrets of Nim. Animated films back in the day used to have realism, which they weren't afraid of exploring trauma, pain, and unexpected events characters experience when they go through their struggles. Animators, scriptwriters, and voice actors would use their creativity exploring the intimate parts of their characters when they're in vulnerable situation that makes the audience feel what the characters are feeling. But today, when you watch movies like Zootopia, K-pop Demon Hunters, Encanto, Giant Meatballs, and many other modern 3D animated films, you don't seem to feel much for the characters when they're in vulnerable situation. And the reason why is because they don't seem to add that much meaning behind the characters or journey they go through, and sometimes the script writing feels generic.
I hurt her. Who? My mom. I got so angry and I lost control. I'm just so sick of being perfect. I'm never gonna be good enough for her.
Some people might say that these films have comedic genre and satire themes, which is why people wouldn't feel emotional when the characters are in vulnerable situation. Which, sure, that might be a valid argument, but you look at movies like Kung Fu Panda, for example. The genre of this film is comedy and action. When you watch the second film, where Po is trying to find himself what his lineage is, there is a scene that exposes his mother sacrificing his life to save her child. And you can see the dark reality of losing your loved ones, especially from a young age. I don't know about you, but for me that scene got me in tears. Point is, the main thing I want to focus on in this video is there is an animation studio found in 2005 which does have a lot of potential for its success and cultural relevance in Gen Z era, and the studio is called Laika, which I'm sure many of you have watched films like Coraline that gained a lot of attention, including Corpse Bride, which was produced by Warner Brothers by help of Laika to polish the quality of their project. There are other animated films Laika released, which was Kubo and the Two Strings, Missing Link, ParaNorman, and The Box Trolls. There's also an upcoming movie called Wildwood, which I'm looking forward to actually. The animation looks great and well developed, and I can't stop looking at this mesmerizing owl. Laika is doing what many Hollywood animation movies fail to do, is exploring the maturity, dark themes, variety of tones in their films. Many animation studios are exploring quote-unquote safer side of their stories. Although movies like Missing Link wasn't creatively or publicly appreciated as other stop-motion films, Laika made success exploring the mature and dark themes in PG-rated movies. Even though ParaNorman, Kubo, and the Two Strings didn't make that much money at the box office as Coraline, these films explored atmospheric elements in their films, including unique creativity of their animation. For many generations, we have explored hand-drawn 2D animation and 3D since the 90s, and during the early 2000s, we started getting exposure of stop motion, where the characters basically are made out of puppets, clay figures, or dolls. Laika very much made a lot of success from stop motion, however, it didn't get equal amount of cultural relevance compared to Disney, DreamWorks, anime, and other animation studios. The only film that gained cultural relevance is obviously Coraline, despite the fact they have produced other stop-motion animation films that were great. And I think there's a great reason why Laika is critically acclaimed for its creativity more than other American animated studios. And that's because this company is independent outside of Hollywood, where creators can have freedom for their creativity rather than going into this extreme level of money-making machine studio like Disney and other companies in America, specifically Hollywood. Highly successful companies like Disney and DreamWorks are struggling at the box office due to rising production costs and post-pandemic shifts towards streaming, which has made audiences much more selective moviegoers, where they prefer to wait consuming content on streaming rather than buying tickets in the theaters. And, the skyrocketing budget making it harder for original films to profit. This financial strain is worsened by intense competition and widespread franchise fatigue as viewers increasingly reject unoriginal sequels and remakes in favor of the original, which has emotionally deep storytelling of the past. Back to the safer side of their stories I was talking about. Unlike Laika and Japanese anime, many American animated films try to make their movies light-hearted, exploring light comedy, musicals, and happily ever after narratives. It's honestly sad that they're known for these themes nowadays because Disney and DreamWorks back in the day used to explore a diverse range of themes in their stories, having light-hearted fairy tales, emotional nostalgia, unconventional protagonists, satirical adventures, love, friendship, while also exploring dark fantasy, danger, grief, and mature themes, making children understand the reality of the world that doesn't always fall in their expectations. There's also this misconception that a lot of modern animators have is animation is only for children. And it's not just only animators, but people in general. And to be honest, I can't blame them because even I myself used to have this way of thinking. However, Netflix TV shows like Arcane and DreamWorks movies like Prince of Egypt debunks this narrative that animation is only targeted towards children. There are foreign animated films that aren't exclusive towards kids. One example I can give is The Breadwinner, where the story is about a little girl where her family is struggling to survive and her father unjustly is arrested by the Taliban. The family struggles to survive financially, so this little girl disguises herself as a boy to earn money by getting a job. This film is based on real-life geopolitical problems where women in Afghanistan are extremely suppressed by the Taliban regime, where they can't have access to education, healthcare, and many other basic needs. There is a reason why Disney, DreamWorks, Anime, Laika, and other animation studios films resonated with so many people. It's not just the lighthearted comedy, simple friendship, or love stories that people have been entertained by, but mature and complex themes people grew up understanding and finding it relatable. One of the last important note, one of the main reasons why Laika deserves recognition for its creativity is stop motion doesn't heavily rely on AI when it comes to handcraft artistry. Laika is critically acclaimed for blending stop motion with groundbreaking technology, which they use 3D printed faces to create highly original and visually breathtaking films. Unlike larger studios that cater to broad commercial trends, Laika is praised for taking artistic risks, which is tackling dark or mature themes, as I've mentioned previously, and executing physical craftsmanship in a masterful way. They continuously polish their handcraft when using puppets as their characters. This is one of the very few companies coming up with rich and inventive ideas. Most American animation studios started to heavily rely on AI when it comes to 3D, including 2D animation, which 2D used to be part of handcraft. However, 3D recently has been less productive since recent projects have been a lot more reliant on AI and using ChatGPT for dialogue, which the way how the characters are speaking seems very cringe and doesn't relate to realistic human emotion. Listen, I'm not saying using AI is entirely bad. You can use AI to further help an individual with their work, but if you become heavily reliant on AI, the execution of the project is going to fail and it will lack realism. Just because AI gains knowledge doesn't mean they entirely understand the human psychology. Script writing or movies are meant to come from the creator's perspective, not AI. That's the whole point of storytelling. It's man-made. When Pixar released Elemental a few years ago, they relied on AI for artificial intelligence. They used machine learning algorithm to help animate the main character, Amber, who's the main fire, where the artist wouldn't have to continuously animate her flames. Although Disney using ChatGPT for dialogue hasn't been confirmed, Disney fans have been speculating that the movie Wish was written by ChatGPT due to cringe dialogue, and this is also similar with the film Elemental. Although I'm not against the studio exploring sequels or spin-off for the beloved characters in the future, as long as they are executed well. The studio is also praised by so many people for not heavily relying on sequels, reboots, or existing IP compared to how we have been bombarded with these things with larger studios, aka Disney, DreamWorks, and many other American animation studios. And you also gotta appreciate this company for not pandering to social justice political activists for the sake of modernizing or forcing diversity onto people's throat. Instead, their stories where characters that come from diverse backgrounds tend to be natural. Kubo and the Two Strings, for example, where it takes place in Japan, is based off traditional folktale where a boy is dealing with grief about his parents' loss and overcoming those grief, including fears when he has to go through his journey of survival. I hope you guys understand why I made this video. My main intention was to make my audience in this generation appreciate the modern creativity of animation, which is obviously Laika, and make them bring this studio have cultural relevance, since it has become very clear the consequences Hollywood is dealing with today, wasting their creative potential for the sake of identity politics, unnecessary reboots, and sequels. Laika, on the other hand, has been exploring unique ways to make animation emotional depth to the characters, and the themes most of the time tend to be darker, complex, and mature. And since there has been discourse among animation fans online worrying if AI would take over the authenticity and human-like creativity of animation, I would encourage my audience to go watch Wildwood this year and support Laika, since the company is coming up with revolutionary ideas where artists behind the camera are modern day's pioneers in this generation of human history. And I'm hoping for the future that Laika Animation Studio consistently does well with their success, cultural impact, and creativity.